Brian, welcome to the Lead, Learn, Grow podcast. Thanks for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I've been excited to talk to you. You've got an interesting background and your company does some interesting things. I'd love to just start there with 288 Group. Can you explain to folks in layman's terms what you do and how you're different than maybe another marketing organization?
Wow. Tough question to start. I only say tough because over the years, I've probably struggled most with giving someone like, well, what's your elevator pitch? We started our business and we couldn't quite define it, right? And so when the very early stages, we called ourselves a resource agency, meaning that we aspired to be a resource for brands who weren't exactly sure what they were trying to accomplish, or they had some pieces of the puzzle but couldn't quite figure it out. We wanted them to connect with us, and we wanted to be a resource for saying, hey, we may not be the person who does that, but we know this person, right?
Mhm.
We were clear in the beginning as to what we did do. We were strong in consultancy. We were strong in advisory. We had some sales acumen, but we didn't do creative, right? We didn't do digital. We didn't do public relations. We have always thought that those were things kind of outside of our bounds. And as our business grew, we worked with a consultant kind of with this exact problem. How do we tell people exactly what we do? And ultimately, the common theme between all of our sort of areas of business was creating really interesting and fun experiences for the customer, right? So by default, then we are defined as an experiential marketing company. And effectively what we're doing through that is helping brands create a productive and successful one-on-one relationship with their guests or with their clients. And we do that through helping them create really interesting experiences. And so we're not media buyers, right? That's really not what we do. I think that media is a component of someone's overall marketing or ad strategy. Sponsorship is a piece of that. But when you sponsor something, and really we came at this kind of from a sponsorship standpoint, you can be a sponsor of VCU Athletics, or you can be a sponsor of the University of Richmond. You can be a sponsor of VCU. But in our opinion, and sort of the evolution, the seed of this company was, I'm really glad that you're a sponsor of the University of Virginia, but you're wasting a lot of money if all you're going to do is buy that sign and put an ad in the program, right? It's not enough to engage people. And so I think that if COVID and the shutdown taught us anything, it's how much we miss those one-on-one experiences. And while media and digital has a component and a piece of that, we really want to help brands create successful one-on-one connections and experiences with their customers. So experiential is nothing more than the root of interesting experiences. And we can help companies do that by helping them build a really engaging event. So Virginia 529 or Dominion Energy, they may be at the Watermelon Festival. So what can we do at the Watermelon Festival that makes people want to come up and talk to Richmond Region Tourism? What can we do with the Dominion Energy Charity Classic to make people want to come up and talk to a Dominion Energy booth or a solar spot activation? So there are elements of that that, again, we are aiming to try to help businesses connect one-on-one with customers. And I would say that this is more of an opinion. I think brands and marketing directors are interested in the idea of grassroots marketing. I think that's appealing to them conceptually. Executing on a grassroots program is really, really hard. People don't oftentimes know where to get the resources. They don't know where to go. Once they get there, they don't know how to staff it. They don't know what it ought to look like. They don't know the questions they ought to ask. And generally speaking, in a sponsorship environment, the entity or the property, the raceway, the college, the pro team, they'll give you access. Sure, you want to be a vendor? No problem. More power to you. Because in their mind, there's a broader spectrum of opportunities in a vendor space. There's only so many signs. There's only so many pages in the program. There's only so many media spots and a broadcast in which they can sell. So they're putting some type of pre-qualified sort of budget on that sign because they only have 20 of them to sell. They want to get $200,000. So they're going to put $10,000 per sign on there so they can do it. Hey, can I appear at a game and give out something cool for the guests and fans? That'd be awesome. No problem. Come on out. It's like a free asset for you. So we're really, our goal is to help companies broaden the appeal and broaden the scope of their sponsorship through creating really interesting one-on-one guest experiences. And that's really the definition of experiential marketing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I would guess, and you can tell me, so I'm thinking like, okay, well, what are some of the benefits of doing that from a business perspective? And I'm guessing part of it is like the emotional connection with people who will use your product or your service. Maybe another one is what? Probably feedback, data collection in a way. I mean, what are some of the things that your customers say that they love about working with you guys?
I, uh, I would say from a brand's perspective, the purpose of experiential is really multiple, right? So the probably the best example we have is Virginia 529. Virginia 529 is a tax code. It's the 529 tax code. That's really where it came from. And if you went back, I'm going to guess 10 years, maybe longer than that, 15 years, Virginia 529 introduced itself and people are like, what the heck is this? What is this number? No one knew. So the advertising in the beginning was nothing more than what is the Virginia 529, right? I would guess now that most people living in Virginia, 15 years, 20 years after the sort of the public sort of advertising launch of understand what it is. People still have questions, right? We put money in it all the time. And so what it allows us to do on site is to be an advocate and an ambassador for that brand, is to answer some very direct questions that may otherwise prevent people from opening or feeling secure about trying to do it. So we are generally not at the stage at which when we're on site creating a lot of awareness for a brand. Generally, there's already an awareness through a media spend or longevity of the brand or consistent messaging, but they may have reservations or questions. So our team is always prepared then to greet them with a smiling face and to answer 5 or 6 questions, which may be a deterrent or a hindrance. At some point in the conversation, the dialogue, they may get to some point about the brand or some investment technology or some investment piece that we're not able to really answer, but we always get the same ones. Well, what happens if I don't live in Virginia anymore? No problem. Your 529, it's available for people out of state. What happens if my kid gets a college scholarship? No problem. You can repurpose it for books or housing. So what happens if my kid decides not to go to college, right? Oh, well, no problem. You can repurpose it now. And in the 529, the scope of the 529 is actually expanding into adult education. So you can use it for yourself if you want to go back and get a continuing education degree. So there's lots of aspects. So really, a lot of times in that regard, it's further information, which people may not want to, although they see the commercials, they hear about it, they think it might be good for them, but they're really just not interested or invested enough to go online to research those questions. And oh my gosh, you're that customer service agent that we've been looking to talk to. I think that one of the failures of a lot of these online companies is the inability to talk to anybody. Right? They will intentionally hide their telephone number. I want a customer service question. I can't find a telephone number. That drives me bonkers. Yes. Read this help article. I don't want to read the help article. I want to talk to somebody, right? I still think that's a missing thing. I tell everybody that the best company I've ever worked for customer service is GoDaddy, right? GoDaddy, they have a number, you pick up, someone picks up, and they're incredibly prompt. I won't go anywhere else. I mean, we do everything, hosting, websites, everything through GoDaddy because of that customer service. So a lot of times with Virginia 529, it's just someone to ask a question to that they didn't know the answer to. It's a super simple question. And then sometimes you have companies like Dominion. Everyone knows Dominion. You probably have in fairness to a company like Dominion Energy, you probably have one of two opinions: neutral, right, or negative. You generally don't have a positive, like, I love Dominion Energy. You may have a positive perspective of Dominion Energy if you appreciate the amount of money that they donate to charity and the good they do in the community, but you'll read some article about the pipeline or win something or other, and that produces a negative appeal. So part of the purpose of being a good host for Dominion Energy is just to create an experience that gives them a bit of positivity about the brand. I'm neutral about it. I don't care. I got to pay you. I'm glad the light bulb turns on. I'm glad my AC works. but if we can provide an amenity at a concert or an event where I can get free cell phone charging station, and then it gives me a positive feel about that company, right? So each person is a little bit different. Sometimes it's data collection, as you say. Hey, I'm interested in understanding who my customers are. Sometimes it's research, like, are we in the right spot that we may ask some clients some questions? But a lot of times, again, it's to reinforce positivity and or to answer some direct questions that someone may not feel comfortable with and or feel invested enough to go on 529, look at the website, call a number, wait on hold, etc., to answer one very simple question.
Yeah, so for the business owners that are in the audience, do you guys just work like in Central Virginia, or what's the geography that you guys help folks with?
We are all over the Mid-Atlantic. We have done activations in Louisiana. We've done activations up into Ohio and throughout the Mid-Atlantic. The bulk of our staff is based in the Mid-Atlantic. And the value of that is that the recruitment, our recruiting geography is pretty large. And so it's important for us to have staff that we work with in Norfolk, in Roanoke, in Washington, D.C., in Wilmington. And it's important to have those because when we can recruit those staffers for local events, their local knowledge and understanding of the events is great. And it also saves the client money, right? So it's much better to have people that are local to the market. They're a bit more comfortable with getting there, right? So the good example is we had an event recently in Norfolk, and we had 3 local people and 1 person from out of town. And all 3 of the local people, parking was not available for the event. All 3 of the local people parked for like $5, right? Because they could figure out what it was. And the one out of town person, it cost them $45 because they didn't know they were going, right? So they had to pay $45 for parking. But having a mix of local people along with people that we trust that come from Richmond or come from other places. But a lot of times our clients take us where they want to go. And so we've done some activations in Louisiana with WinBet. We started our relationship with WinBet, who has recently just ceased their Virginia operations, but not part of the story. But we started doing some work with him at the racetrack and at the Flying Squirrels and some others. And they're like, hey, do you mind helping us procure some brand ambassadors and do an event set up in Baton Rouge? So no problem. I think there is some value to having national presence in national companies. But a lot of our work is focused kind of in the Mid-Atlantic and the neighboring states.
Yeah, interesting. So how have you seen, if at all, has technology and social media, has that changed the way you guys think about running events and what happens at the different events? What's been the impact of that over the years, if any?
Yeah, I think it's helped our business, right? I think it's helped our business for 2 things. I think that a lot of the social media elements and tools that we have, they have been created to avoid advertising, right? They're designed to do that. My wife and I are watching a show on Hulu, and we actually don't like the commercials. They actually are an annoyance, right? And so while the brand is there and it is top of mind, it actually makes me have a negative impression, like you're interrupting the show, right? I don't have that same feeling when I'm watching a sporting event. Maybe just I'm much more accustomed to it, but something about the idea of I've paid for this streaming service. Now you're making me watch a commercial. I'm more annoyed by the commercial than informed. If I am on ESPN app and I'm wanting to watch some video of some 1.5-minute press conference and I got to watch a 45-second ad, it like sometimes I just click out. I don't want it. And so I think I think that the value of an experience, a one-to-one event experience, is very, very important and a nice part of that. Because first of all, and this goes to the second part, but if I can create an interesting, engaging experience for that customer, and I'm willing to engage with that brand and willing to ask you something, I'm a much, much more receptive client. A lot of times in social media, I'm a deflecting client. I actually don't want your ad. I'd rather you not have the ad in front of me. It annoys me that you're there. But if I've gone up to you at the booth and I'm like, hey, how are you? I have some questions. That's the client that you want, right? You've broken down lots of barriers that you've gotten the customer to want to walk up to you and speak to you. And then so I think it's our job to have appealing, presentable brand ambassadors that are attractive, but I don't mean just hot, right? Sorry. Attractive can be lots of engaging, right? Welcoming, pleasing. Please come up to the booth. Let me talk to you. So it's important for us not to have our brand ambassadors sit behind the table on their phone, right? You can't have that, right? Our brand ambassadors need to be up out in front of the table, welcoming guests, asking them questions, engaging with them. Knowledgeable about the product is important, but then also we need to create activities and get them something that's like actively interesting about it. So a couple of years ago, for example, we redesigned the Virginia 529 setup to look like a college dorm room. And so the whole backdrop was like a college dorm and bunk beds. And you've seen all the kids, the parents this week on Facebook posting pictures of dropping their kids off at school. So we had a mini fridge in there. We had a refrigerator. We had books because we wanted people to feel like they were coming into the dorm room. That was part of the presentation, right? And so generally what happens at the 529 booth, especially with young kids, the parents have questions and what do the kids do? So then on the side, we have a little pitching toss game or some type of inflatable activity for the kids to be able to have so they can be occupied for 45 seconds while we're sort of talking to the parents. So I think the on-site experience, particularly if you can pick the right events and get the right group to help you, can be a very successful and important and vital piece of your overall marketing strategy. Because again, I think a lot of advertising, a lot of the tools we use, they're designed to avoid them. Right. And so when you can get to an event and you can have some one-on-one communication with people is great. So technology to me has helped us. And I think with, again, I kind of go back to COVID that people went without experiences for a couple of years. It's just dawned on me in the last 30 days that not that I've forgotten what it was like, but we started shaking hands again, right? Kind of without sort of thinking about it and going out to these fairs and festivals. And I probably have been to half a dozen concerts or something this year. So to me, those type of on-site experiences are more important than ever. And I think that people will cherish them more. And I'd rather talk to, I'd rather talk to 10 really great customers who are really, really interested in my product than putting something on social media that 100 people might get and 90 of them are going to be annoyed by it.
Right. Also think about too, like, maybe even some of the work that you guys have done, but like you go to the fair or you go to a squirrels game or you go to, the golf tournament or whatever. And, there's friendly people that are working the booth or the setup or whatever. And, especially young folks, they take a picture, they get a selfie, and then, for free, they're just, they're being ambassadors. You've sort of transferred ambassadorship. So now I put the picture on my feed and other people see, and I think it's really cool. And I think, and this is really an uneducated opinion, but my instincts are that the kind of work that you guys are doing is probably going to be even more and more important because the hardest thing in business today is to get someone's attention. That's like in sales, it used to be back in the day, it was all about closers. Like we're looking for closers. The coffee is for closers. Well, now it's not about closing. Now it's about opening. Like the greatest salespeople, those are people that can start conversations. Like you find those people, you've got something. And so I think like getting, sort of in the mix with the people who buy or could buy your product, I think it's more important now than ever. Otherwise, you may never reach them.
Well, you're 100% right. And there's not much more that drives me bonkers than sending email after email after email to someone that goes unanswered, right? And so we also try to sell sponsorships, and we've got a lot of those. But I would say, just real close on the event side, I think that a lot of people, if you're a business owner, you're looking, what event should I go to? I think when you go to the state fair, you're going there almost as much for the vendors. You're there for the experience, right? You're there to see that. If I go to the golf tournament, Dominion Energy Charity Classic, I don't care who wins, right? I'm not really in it to see individual play well. I'm just interested in the experience as a whole, right? If I go to a concert, I'm interested in what's going on before. Then I'm interested in the concert that's going on. The downside of going to a competitive game that I really do care about the end result, I'm much more interested in the competition. I'm there for the competition. I'm not really there for the festival. I think I love the people at the Flying Squirrels. The Flying Squirrels to me are right in the middle. I don't really care who wins. right? I'm
Right.
not really there whether the Squirrels win a lot. They could lose every dang game. I'm still going to go. I think it's
Right.
fun, right? I would
Right.
like them to win. That's more fun, but
Yeah.
I'm there as much for the experience in terms of what's going on. So when you're an event goer and you're there and you go to River Rock, I'm there for the vendors. Like I'm a open and receptive customer, right? And I'm not, my phone's not here. I'm not being, communicated to.
Mhm.
So I totally agree with you. I think that's getting people to want to talk to you is a really, really hard part. And so
Yeah.
creating that engaging sort of programming on site is really, really important.
Yeah, no, I love it. So let's talk a little bit about your path because you've got an interesting path. So you're a North Carolinian and you went to school at Chapel Hill. So um, you are you were telling me before we started recording uh, some of your exploits in the basketball scene down there, which is it's easy to see how someone could be like, "Hey, I want to work in sports," after spending your formative years in Chapel Hill and all the things that go on around that. So, when did you decide I want to do something in the world of sports marketing? When did that realization come to you?
So I attended, my kids think I'm 100 years old as I tell them I went to college with neither a cell phone or the internet, which is shocking to understand how you could possibly do that. But I went to school in the mid to late 90s, and sports marketing was something that was really on the precipice of taking off, right? At UNC, there was not a major. There was one class for sports marketing. It was taught actually out of the journalism department. And the textbook was the Sports Business Journal, which used to come out weekly or monthly, right? There wasn't much to it. And so that was really the first inclination. I liked this. And so I ended up getting 2 degrees at Carolina. I got a journalism degree because I liked advertising. I liked the creative side of it. I liked the sports marketing side of it. But the professors there were smart, and that they really also pushed me to understand that there's a business side of this, that there's a business part of sports. And naively, I probably went into it like a lot of other people. And, why do you want to work in sports? Well, I love sports. I love people. And both of those can be true. Doesn't mean you're qualified or interested at all in getting into sports marketing, right? I tell people you have to be interested in the business of the sport because it is very, very clearly a business on a lot of levels. It's a business at high school. It's a business at college. It's certainly a business in the pros, right? It's a business in all of these tiers. So I tell people that it's great that you love people. It's great that you love sports. That's an interesting way. You can be a fan on the weekend and go to parties to watch games, right? But do you have an interest in a piece of the business, right? But there's lots of areas of the business. There's accounting. People are sports finance people. They can be numbers guys. That's fine. You can be a public relations person and have interest in how media perceives and tells stories. You can be in sponsorship, right? You can be in how corporations use or interact with athletes or with brands. You can be an agent, right? You can recruit athletes and players. You can be a contract negotiator. You can be, traditionally it was a lawyer. You had to have a lawyer to negotiate your NFL contract, your MLB contract. You can be that guy. You can be the guy that's just buddies with the players, right? And there's a role for that, particularly on. You can be a runner. You can be something like that. So I wanted to do something. I wrote a whole bunch of letters. It's kind of funny. I think I typed them on my brother word processor, to the Atlanta Braves, to the Tampa Bay Bucks, to the Salt Lake City, Olympic Games, to the Atlanta Olympic Games, to Nike, to IMG. And there was an agency in Washington, D.C. at the time called Advantage International. I sent them a resume as an intern. A gentleman called me back, and he was a University of Arizona graduate. And so as soon as he got on the phone, we started talking college basketball. He offered me an unpaid internship in Washington, D.C., starting the day after I graduated. And so I graduated on Saturday. Sunday, I packed up, and Sunday afternoon, evening, I drove to Washington, D.C., and I started at Advantage as an unpaid intern in the summer of like 97. I quickly found out that everyone else in the program was a 3-month intern. They were all going back to school, and I had graduated. So I just kept coming to work. And so it was Monday and I would come to work, and finally, like November, people were like, what are you still doing here? Like, I'm like, well, I don't have to go back to school. I'm just continuing to learn and take on projects. And I think I had made $0 from like June until Christmas. And I remember writing a handwritten letter to the president of the company saying, I really need to get paid. Like, can you offer me any type of job? So he emailed me over Christmas and offered me $1,000 a month to work through January through April. So I made $4,000 my first like 9 or 10 months in Washington, D.C. Advantage ultimately during that time was acquired by the Interpublic Group, changed its name to Octagon. And Octagon represented professional athletes. And that was really the division that was based out of Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C. that I worked on. And for the better part, I finally did get a job after about a year representing athletes, and probably 70% of my time was doing corporate sponsorships. 30% of my time was trying to recruit athletes out of college and sign agreements. And ultimately my path did not, my personality didn't align well with being an agent. I'm arrogant, but agents are on a whole nother level, right? The very, very best agents are extremely self-confident, and they will tell you how great they are all the time. But there's something about having that internal fortitude and that ability to be that arrogant and that confident what you do, to be able then to consult and advise with these athletes who are at the very, very top of their game. And the athletes can sense very quickly whether you're weak, right? Whether you don't have, if you're insecure in the decisions that you're going to make. It didn't align with me very well, right? And so my path sort of took me more in the direction of corporate sponsorship. And probably the best learning experience, and yet the most frustrating thing, my job description was simply to make money. So here are the athletes that we represent in football and basketball and hockey and baseball. Go make money. And that was it. It was a very flat organization. There wasn't a lot of report up. There wasn't a lot of report down. I didn't manage anybody. No one reported to me. I didn't have an assistant. My job was just to go make money. However, they didn't really care. Like, go make money for the company, go make money for the athlete. The idea of making money for the athlete was that if we got them anything of value in terms of a sponsorship, it made them like the agency more, and it allowed us to continue to represent them so that we could ultimately sign contracts for them. And 2 or 3% of $100 million contract was much better than the $5,000 cell phone deal or car deal that I could get for them. But right about the time I was at Octagon, Jerry Maguire came out, and there's been very few movies that I like loved so much. I'm like, it's very, there's lots and lots of pieces of Jerry Maguire which are really true, right? It's a really, I mean, some of it is Hollywood glamorized, but there's a lot of the aspects which are great. And so for almost 8 years, I just figured out how to make money, and it served me very well in business to learn how to do that without a whole lot of rules. I had to make up every day what I wanted to do. Again, no one was really telling me. I didn't have to accomplish really anything. At the end of the year, I just had to say, how much money did you make for the company, and how much money did you make for these individual athletes, and tell me what you did. So while there was very little oversight, it was a really great learning experience, and something, again, that's suited me well as a business owner much later in life.
What's so there has to be you have to have like a favorite story from those days. Like, is there a favorite story, like some sort of obscure sponsorship, or there's got to be a great story that is suited to be told on a family friendly podcast? Let me make that caveat.
So there is one of my greatest achievements, and sort of the reason I got out of the business all at the same. And there's some genuine fault in this as well. Like, I take some responsibility for this. Sometime in the late 90s, there was a shoe company in Los Angeles, California called K-Swiss. And I had befriended the marketing director, and the marketing director had asked me if there was a athlete, they wanted to do a campaign on these up and coming athletes. And so I'm like, I've got a couple of these athletes. So one of the athletes was a hockey player that had played at the University of Michigan, who was playing with the Vancouver Canucks. And albeit I'm a Southern guy, I cannot skate. I had never been to a hockey game before. I didn't know anything about hockey, but somehow convinced K-Swiss that Bill McCalt ought to be in their commercial, and they agreed. And it was part of a small campaign. And so Bill McCall had a national television commercial. And about 6 months later, I got another call from Daryl at K-Swiss. And he's like, I'd like to do this again. Do you have anyone else? And I said, believe it or not, we represent this quarterback from the New Orleans Saints. His name is Aaron Brooks. And so Aaron was a University of Virginia graduate. Aaron had just started, it looks like it's half a season for Jeff Blake, who I think had broken his foot, if I believe. And so Aaron came in and had an amazing 6 or 8 game stretch, right? Threw a bunch of touchdown passes, super nice guy. So K-Swiss says, great. So we go to LA with Aaron Brooks, and we do a 2.5 day photo shoot out in LA. Aaron feels like he's the coolest guy in the whole world. And they end up cutting 2 national 30-second commercials for Aaron Brooks. So I thought I was really cool, right? I'm there at the photo shoot. I'm in Los Angeles at 2 a.m. They're closing down streets. Aaron and I are throwing football back and forth at Cal State Fullerton in the field is where they kind of film this whole thing. It was neat. So I think, man, I'm going to kill it, right? I'm going to be this agent of the future. So without getting into all the nitty gritty, Aaron's cousin is Michael Vick. And so Michael comes out of Virginia Tech, signs with a competitive agent. Aaron had a good relationship with us, liked what we did. The agent that initially had signed Michael, who was connected to Jim Kelly, his brother, the quarterback of the Bills, had tried to take advantage of Michael. So Michael, long story short, fires their agency and hires us. And so I'm on the team helping to manage Michael Vick. On a lot of, and this was, Michael couldn't have been hotter, right? So within the first year, we did a deal with Coca-Cola, we did a deal for Rawlings, he did several autograph signings. We did a deal with Coca-Cola, and we did the deal to put him on the cover of EA Sports in the John Madden football game. The experiences of working with those guys were great. And this was, and my fault, we put Michael in some really tough situations, right? And so I just watched the other night the documentary on Johnny Manziel, and there were parts of it that really frustrate you, right? Why didn't Johnny take advantage of these opportunities that were given to them? But you also understand how much pressure is under these guys that are 20 years old, and they're given anything and everything that they want. And Michael has a very tragic and heroic story all at the same time. I don't hold any ill will for Michael. I don't approve of some of the things that happen, but if you ever watched his 30 for 30, the culture, the money, everything that goes into that, it's a really, really, really interesting sort of dynamic on how we all grow up differently and what goes into that. But as much as I loved it, Michael drove me crazy, right? Great guy, but drove me crazy. And that's because we put too much pressure and too much expectation on Michael to be something that he wasn't. And that was really our responsibility and our fault. And I didn't do a very good enough job at that point in my life of protecting Michael against forces or people that wanted things from him that he ultimately couldn't produce. And then, we represented athletes like John Elway and David Robinson and Mia Hamm and Robert Tractor Trailer, who was a big power forward from the University of Michigan, and Del Curry, who now ends up representing his son, Steph Curry. And so Octagon has been fantastic and still have lots of really great friends from there, and learned an awful lot about how to represent individuals and the value of that and the good and the bad. The value of representing an individual is there's only one of them, right? But there's only one of them and they're people. And so you're sort of at the whim of how they're going to be that day. If they're in a good mood, it's great. If they're not in a good mood, it's tough. But took the sort of experiences from Octagon and representing athletes and all of my connections at the end really were with corporations, not really so much with the players. And then moved really kind of for socially and personal reasons, I wanted to get out of Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C. and move to Charlottesville right as they were opening up the John Paul Jones Arena. And so tried to head up, or we headed up corporate sales for University of Virginia Athletic Department starting 2005, which is about 18 months or so right before the John Paul Jones Arena opened.
Yeah, so I can only imagine. You think about, people behave under pressure differently than they do, in day-to-day life. And you think about athletes where people are always trying to get a piece of them, and they can't figure out who's trying to help them make money and who's trying to take their money. And it must have been like a laboratory of human relations, just learning to deal with all that. What a great experience.
There was and I remember this very fondly. It's super cool, but LeBron James was a high school senior. And so the McDonald's All-American game was in Cleveland and sponsored by Coke, McDonald's. So Michael Vick was a Coke ambassador, Coke sponsor. So he was a judge at the dunk contest in Cleveland. After the dunk contest and the festivities for the night were over, we all went to the steakhouse, and it was like an upstairs reserved room. There was probably 10 of us at the table. So it was Michael, myself, the chief marketing officer of McDonald's, along with like two of his cohorts, the chief marketing officer of Coca-Cola, and one other person from Octagon. Michael was the only Black guy in the room. He was probably 5 years younger than everybody else. And in retrospect, the pressure and the environment that we put him in that regard, it's 100% my fault, right? I thought, oh, Michael will be able to handle this, no problem. He can, he's a great quarterback. He can do this. It was a miserable experience, right? And then I felt so bad for Michael. We ordered something, and the person's bringing out like this seafood soup, and they bump and they spill it on Michael's white shirt. So Michael then has to sit there in the second half of the meeting trying to make conversation with the CMO of Coca-Cola or the CMO of McDonald's because they're interested in using them. I'm like super excited thinking, oh my God, this is the ticket, Michael. You're going to get $10 million from McDonald's. And he's sitting there smelling like seafood soup for the entire night. And I cringe now thinking about, again, not being able to read the room, not understanding what was at stake, and being so driven to be successful and make money for myself and for the company and for Michael, that we put him in a situation that was very compromising for him and made him very, very uncomfortable, right? And probably in the end deteriorated what trust we had together, right? Because I was the one who put him in that situation, and I shouldn't have.
Yeah, no, those are some great stories, really. I could listen to these stories all day, but I think we better head towards the exit here. I know you've got a busy day, and I don't want to hold you up. Let me ask you one more question on the way out the door here. If there's a business owner that wants to engage, if there's an organization, someone listening that just wants to engage with you guys, like where can they find you? What's the best way to reach out and have a conversation or even just learn more?
Yeah. So sound like a salesy. I mean, you can go to our website, the 288group.com. We do have a list of sort of case studies that we've done. We really don't, as a company, as a culture, we don't schedule a whole lot of internal meetings, right? And so we want our days to be pretty free. So we like talking to people, right? Pick up the phone, email us, and call us. And one of the things I think we've learned in our business is, and I've read some stories that you should do the opposite. We say yes most of the time, right? Yeah, we'll try that. Sure. Like, what do you think? Like, and we're happy to engage with people and try to figure that out. I've probably grown more from listening to people and being open-minded and saying yes than saying no, right? And I think there's some article today, The Power of No. Thought that was interesting. I read it. I didn't really agree with it. Although I would say that there are times in my life and business that I probably should have focused slightly more, and maybe saying no was important. But I've learned more and created a lot more opportunities, a lot more networking, a lot more friends by saying yes. So the point of that story is just call us or email us, right? Look at our email and say, hey, how did you do this? And I'm a big believer in being very transparent, and we'll give you any information you want. We, just for we really rarely sign contracts with our vendors or our sponsors. We work with them as long as they want to work with us, right? And I never want a contract to be the reason that you're compelled to work with us. If you no longer want us to work with you and you don't think our services are working for you, just say I'd rather not work with you. I'm like, okay, great. We want there to be that sort of dialogue. So anyone who has questions, would like to learn a bit more about successful experiential programs, give us a call. We may not be the right fit. We may be the right fit, but yeah, definitely reach out. I enjoy talking to business owners and enjoy listening to them.
And I'll put your contact info in the show notes and the website and all that. And there are some examples on the website I noticed when I was preparing for us to chat of some of the things that you guys have done and some of your partnerships and all that. So it's very, very informative. So Brian, good job today. Good stories and a good conversation. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much. I was nervous. Well, I shouldn't have been nervous. I can talk to anybody. So
Yeah.
I didn't want you to be like, how are we going to fill 45 minutes or an hour? Like we only got to chapter 1. So we'll come back again for chapter 2, 3, 4, and 5, right?
Yeah, I have a feeling that when you get rolling on these stories, filling time is not going to be a problem at all.
No, that's not a problem. And generally when there's a game on and a few beers, the stories get better and longer, right? So
Yeah, and some of
you
them
get
are
a little
even
bit of the
true, right?
unabbreviated version.
All right, don't go anywhere. I'm going to stop recording.
And I
Thanks
appreciate it.
again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Brian.
Yeah.